Art teachers of Reddit, what's your draw anything you want story? Time to go back to one of my least favorite classes where I was told I should stick to theater because my art wasn't scary, just bad. It's Em here, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Story 1. I was an art teacher for 4 years and have so many stories. So many stories. One that comes to mind is a drawing this strange little child who was oddly obsessed with me made me as a gift. Now, for context, my personal aesthetic is what my friends affectionately call adult tomboy goth, which is to say I wear all black, somewhat androgynous clothing, and have a penchant for the dark and absurd. Of course, in work environments, I dress more professionally. But my kids all knew I was a dark-humored little oddball, and they love me for it. So this girl is doing free drawing, and every time I walk over, she covers up the paper with her arm and hisses at me like a cat, as she was working and didn't want me to see her picture yet. After about an hour, she scurries over to me with this huge grin on her face and announces, OP, OP, I made you a thing. And my lord, oh boy, was it the best gift I have ever received from a child. The drawing was of a skeleton beckoning a crying girl with no eyes into a pre-dug grave. The gravesite was elaborately mapped out with a whole underground portion, where the coffin would be, a tombstone, and little flowers around the tombstone. I laminated it, and to this day, it is still on my bedroom door, even after 3 moves around the country. I frickin' miss teaching. Oh, this story is so sweet, albeit in a scary way. It's always so nice to see how accepting and loving kids are, especially with people that maybe others might deem as a little out there. I do think it's funny how most other teachers, when receiving this drawing, might have been a little freaked out compared to finding it endearing. But it's so great that OP loved the picture and decided to keep it with them. Story 2. I've had some really funny ones, but this one is not, and reminds me whenever I think of it to consider kids' circumstances. I worked in a low-income, high-immigrant population school. This girl was amazing, outspoken, kind, great grasp of English. She drew a picture of her brother and her. I asked her who else was in the picture, since there appeared to be third person. She calmly replied, "That's my brother's head. He was killed in our village right before we went to the refugee camp." I look her up and down and say something sympathetic, masking my horror. "Yeah, they came into my village, grabbed all the boys, and were gonna take them away. My brother and his friend tried to run, so they cut off his head. I was standing right there. Would you like me to draw you a picture?" I said no thank you. I asked her where her little brother, also in art class, was when this happened. "Oh, we dressed him up like a girl. He makes a cute girl." I should mention before the above exchange, we were talking about One Direction, or something totally normal. Someone then commented and added their story. I was a K-12 ESL teacher and worked in schools with high refugee populations. It was heartbreaking to hear some of the stories of the traumas they experienced. And like yours, it would come out at the most innocuous times, usually through drawing or writing. Wow, this story took a turn compared to the last one. I want to work with kids when I graduate, and let me tell you from my time volunteering with them, this kind of behavior is just so normal. Kids will tell you everything from how big their poop was to their parents' most recent fight. And a lot of the time, they're just looking to inform, not looking for sympathy or anything like that. It's a hard line to toe because you don't know how to react to what the child really wanted by telling you. Story 3. I'm a teacher, but I don't teach art. I was teaching a class of 7-year-olds who are usually a blessing, but there's just one kid who has some real problems. He can't speak English at all. Even after spending a year trying to teach him and all his classmates, he just refuses to engage with any teacher and is extremely disruptive, often crying and screaming. I think he has special needs, but that's not handled well in China. Anyway, after battling with him to no avail, assigning him class police roles, everything I just gave up this one day and gave him some paper to draw on while the rest of the kids learn without him distracting them. He drew me a picture of me with a large pee-pee and lots of knives in me with blood and wrote my name in perfect English. It was eerie, but I just felt sad and concerned about what had happened to this boy. The school gave him no support, and I only saw him for about an hour a week. I left the school shortly after, unrelated, and wonder how he is now. Somebody commented, "Wonder how he is now? Probably in prison." That's where unsupported special needs children usually end up throughout the world. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. Unless he got the help he needed, then he's probably doing just fine. Story 4. I ran arts and crafts classes at a youth group for disadvantaged kids. Deciding one day to give them total freedom, I just put out all the supplies we had and let them go crazy. Kids made some really cool works of art, all very colorful and creative. I was talking to one kid when another asked me to help him spell things for his artwork. I go over to his table with him, and he's been making a card for a boy in his class at school. He tells me his friend's mom had just died from cancer, and he wanted to make a card for him to cheer him up, but he couldn't spell anything he wanted to write. He was 13 years old, and I had to help him spell out something like, "Dear blank, I am so sorry about your mom, but I will always be your friend and here for you. Love, blank." I had to help him spell out his own name. He made the card totally unprompted. I feel for the guy. He was totally sweet and caring for his friend, and really smart. He just not got the help he needed. Went home after and had a little sob. Somebody commented, "Thanks for being light in this world." Shout out to OP for being one of the best teachers I've read about since my time on Reddit. This kid obviously sounds like he was struggling due to a lack of support from a system that's obviously failing. I hope he was able to get some help later on in life, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he had dyslexia or something, and the school just never noticed. Story 5. When I was in the 7th grade, our art teacher had us do whatever we wanted to be entered in the school art fair. I was really lazy and decided to just use every color of pastel that was available to draw a rainbow of sorts on a piece of construction paper. Then I tore it all into pieces and glued them all together again randomly. I called the piece Life and argued that it was supposed to represent the chaos and uncertainty that is life. It ended up winning first place in my grades part of the art fair, and I ended up getting a cool art set, but really it was just me being lazy and feeding some BS about a deeper meaning. Somebody commented, "That's pretty ironic." For all the people that spent countless hours planning their project and then poured their hearts and souls into it. Their parents told them it was the best art project they'd ever seen. And then life serves up as it always does, and the person who didn't care and was lazy about it wins. Nice. Story 6. Not a teacher, but in middle school, we got an assignment in art class to draw a still life of fruit. I thought the idea was totally boring and decided to put a creative spin on it. I drew a bunch of different fruits all sitting in the seats of a coliseum, watching an apple kill an orange in the center ring. I failed the assignment, and my teacher even pulled me out into the hallway to tell me directly that she didn't like me or the work that I produced. Didn't let that crush my dream though, and I kept making my assignments weirder and weirder to piss her off. Somebody commented, "As someone who wished to do art and art therapy with kids, I would have given you 100%. Any subject can be boring for some. As long as you followed the guidelines and put the effort in, then it should have been a pass. The whole point of art is pretty much creativity and weirdness." I do understand the point of the assignment, but I also think art is so subjective that to grade it objectively is sort of wrong. I didn't do well in art growing up. Not because I couldn't follow the rules, but just because I wasn't the best artist. So I get where OP comes from with having crappy art teachers that try to make a class about expressing yourself and just having fun into an actual grade. Is pretty stupid, if you ask me. Story 7. Obligatory, not an art teacher, but I got a call about something like this from my kid's art teacher. She was 13 and in 8th grade art, where she was told to do a pencil sketch of whatever she could think of. We had just moved, so the class had been working on this for a week, and she had about a day. The teacher made sure the kid knew she'd be getting an A just for turning something in. But because it was a new school, they were not yet aware that my kid has a morbid sense of humor and a fair amount of artistic talent that she built over the years. 2 days later, the art teacher called me to make sure that everything is okay with my kid because her sketch was of a live hamster in an electric coffee pot. It's one of my favorite pieces of her work. Story 8. Fresh out of college, I got a job working with 1st and 2nd graders at an after-school program. My kids had journals that they wrote and drew in every day. Once I had my 1st graders draw a picture of what they like to eat and write a sentence to go along with it. I was walking around the tables to check their work as they were finishing up and saw that one little boy drew a big brown phallic object with the word dong written across the front. Underneath in broad, bold letters, he'd written, "I like dong." I pulled him aside and asked him to tell me about what he wrote. "Coke is my favorite drink," he told me. I had to explain to him that it's very important to spell Coke, not dong. Too long didn't read. Boy says he likes to eat dong. I'm a little confused. Is dong another word for Coke? Because either this kid was actually trolling OP, even though they might be a little young for that, or it might be worthwhile to do a little call to home just to check in. Story 9. Not a teacher, but when I was in 7th grade, I drew a picture in my art class sketchbook of Barney and Elmo, smoking pot and drinking booze, drawn with colored pencils and all. I showed it to my friends and they thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. The art teacher, however, was not pleased and sent me to the principal's office. The principal then looked through my sketchbook and ripped out all the drawings she deemed as inappropriate. It shattered my soul that day, and I cried for some time afterwards. In fact, I think that's what ended my dream of becoming an artist. Frick you, Mrs. Bernero and Mrs. McKeenan, for robbing me of a better future. Somebody commented, "You can still be an artist now. The internet would love your particular brand of social commentary." Story 10. I'm an art teacher, but this story is about my substitute teacher. I asked my students what they'd been drawing when I was gone. The class was absolutely silent, apart from some boys that were giggling. They were 13 years old. I asked what was so funny, and they said the substitute was great. At the same time, the girls seemed as if they wanted to disappear from the classroom. So I asked why the teacher was so great, and the boys just exploded. "He told us to draw flying dongs." Well, I don't have to say more that substitute teacher never comes to our school again. Somebody commented, "Poor Daryl. Tried to leave his poultry farming life behind when he became a teacher. But as they say, you can take the farmer out of the farm, but you can't take out his dong." What is with the word dong? I am so utterly confused right now, guys. So please, if anyone can explain, please do it in the comments and help me out here. Story 11. Not an art teacher. However, I used to grade the weekly sketchbooks for my art class as a senior. One week, my teacher gave the prompt something with wings. So I'm grading all these sketchbooks that are 80% stick figures from kids that just took art to get an easy fine art credit. Lots of planes and birds. A few angels. Then I get to this one sketchbook that I know dang well belongs to a dude, that it's just coasting for the easy credit. I open it up expecting another stick bird, and instead I'm surprised with this crude but identifiable bucket of KFC wings. I lost my crap and cackled as I gave him a 100, knowing my cranky butt teacher would have instantly failed him if she'd seen it. Story 12. Not my story, but seems to fit here. When I was in school to become a teacher, we had a former principal as a professor, but for one of our courses who was trying to illustrate how difficult it can be to manage parent complaints and how to approach those situations with administration. His example was how he had been called into a conference once with an angry mom and the elementary school art teacher. The mom was furious because the teacher had asked the children to close their eyes and draw whatever came into their imagination. His assumption was that a student had drawn something inappropriate. Nope, the mom was mad because summoning an image in one's mind was, and I quote, witchcraft. Somebody commented, "Summonus imagus." Story 13. It's not drawing, but I gave my high school kids a poetry assignment. They could write about anything that was school appropriate and have one curse word that wasn't a slur or the F-bomb. It had to include so much figurative language, etc. Girl turns in Mrs. My Name is a B word, a poem about how she's tired of writing poems and that she's annoyed with me for assigning so many. It includes all requirements. I gave her a 96. It had a few errors. And the next poem she writes is Mrs. My Name is a cool B word, about how she was sorry she was mean. Somebody commented, "Solid response. Sometimes the only way kids feel comfortable airing their grievances is through their creativity." Was it nice to hear? No. Was it probably still a solid poem that shouldn't be docked points for being a little offensive? Yes. Story 14. In junior high, my art teacher pulled me aside to tell me she was really impressed because I could draw better than her. After that, she pretty much let me have free rein as long as what I was drawing work towards the lesson goal, such as shading, perspective, etc. For the end-of-year project, I did a Robotech Veritech fighter in stipple, drawn using only dots. The next year, when I would have had her again for art, she paid out of pocket for me to take an art course at the community college across the street. She was an absolutely amazing teacher, really. Somebody commented, "Yes, Robotech." Story 15. High school 1977. Not a teacher. While everyone else was drawing Pink Floyd rainbows and peace signs all over everything, the biggest burnout in the class made a wide metal bracelet with intricate triangular designs cut out of it. He turned it in and got a great grade for the first project he ever bothered finishing, and some well-deserved praise for his effort. Teacher handed our work back, and first thing he did was grab a pair of pliers and bent all the triangles outward, making it a thick metal, spiked bracelet. I found that devilishly, disturbingly clever. Somebody commented, "A lone punk rocker in a sea of hippies." Story 16. I got in trouble once for drawing a pooping butt. Little did my teacher know, but the drawing was actually a poorly drawn butterfly that ended up looking like a hairy, pooping butt. And when asked why I put the details I did, like the legs and antenna coming off the segmented body, I said, "I don't know, don't they all look like that?" I saw one at recess and thought it was pretty and wanted to draw it. Thinking of the butterfly, of course. Nope, I ended up having to see the school counselor. Somebody commented, "Never assume what kids are trying to draw. Always ask." This one is very true. One of the girls I babysat drew me a picture and wouldn't tell me what it was. And every wrong guess, she got thoroughly more mad. Eventually, she said it was a dog, and I asked her why it was bright red, and she goes, "It's a hot dog." Story 17. Reminds me of the time I got suspended in kindergarten for drawing a crappy stick figure gun. I tried to save myself that day by saying it was a water gun, since it was so crappy you couldn't tell the difference. But they weren't having it, and little OP went home that day. Somebody commented, "That's a strange thing to get detention for." Not that I particularly approve of that way of raising boys, but when I was a kid, lots of boys would play with toy guns, action figures and stuff, and then drawing guns and scenes with fights was like a normal occurrence. Story 18. Former student here. We were supposed to do a bit of abstract artwork for a course assignment. My work was a framed square cutout from an old t-shirt I had previously used to help restrain an old table. Not only did I get an A on the assignment, but I entered it into a silent auction later that semester, and someone bought it. Somebody commented, also a former student, "The 10th grade art teacher told us to draw the city 50 years from now. I drew flying buildings and she threw it back at me because flying buildings are impossible." Story 19. When I was in 2nd grade, our teacher told us to do a doodle on the back of a quiz if we finished early. I decided to draw a house high in the sky with a long staircase leading to it. To emphasize its height, I drew clouds, but it needed more. I decided to add an airplane. Later, my teacher called me to her desk and I got in trouble because the plane looked like it was heading towards the house. And this was right after 9/11 happened. Still have no idea what I was thinking. I hope the teacher didn't reprimand you badly, especially considering how young you were and how this was probably the only way you were really processing what had happened. That's a big experience for a kid to see, and I'm sure you weren't trying to be malicious or anything. Story 20. Parent here, not an art teacher. In kindergarten, my son came home with a packet of finished assignments he got back from the teacher. One was a paper having them draw a body part with the prompt, "Here are my blank." Example given was feet. What did my kid draw? Butt cheeks. Drawing of the back of a person with two giant, well-drawn, I might add, cheeks. My husband and I laughed our own butt cheeks off when we saw it. We kept the paper, for posterity. Somebody commented, "I laughed at the posterity joke." Clever, OP. Story 21. Student here. My art teacher was somewhat crazy. She let us draw anything we wanted, and to get 100%, all you had to do was tell her it had a deep connection to the earth, or some other nonsense. I drew a jellyfish and told her it represented wisdom because it was immortal. Somebody commented, "I like to imagine one day she will just see a documentary on jellyfish and learn that they can't really learn or have wisdom, and just have this epiphany. That kid was just making crap up. Story 22. As an art teacher and former goth teen, nothing my kids have really drawn has really shocked me. I've had to make kids change things that are inappropriate. One time, a high school girl drew a hand giving the middle finger in chalk when we were drawing outside, so we changed it to a peace sign. I did have to call home for 2 first graders who were drawing pooping butts while I was giving instructions. Their moms and I laughed through the entire phone call. Look, I still think drawings of pooping butts are funny, even though I'm far past the age of a first grader. I remember one time I got in trouble for drawing a butt crack, and I tried to reason that it was the spine of a book. Needless to say, I didn't get recess that day. Story 23. When I was around 8 or 9, I got into drawing cars, and simultaneously into drawing tribal decorations. Probably not PC, but the type a lot of people get as a tattoo. So I drew a car with a tribal decal. And because of the hook-like shapes in the tribal decal, I inappropriately named the car the H word? When she was done laughing, my mom took the time to explain the world's oldest profession. Oh, okay. I get it now. I get it. Story 24. One kid had to have a meeting with the principal, her parents, and the art teacher, because the art teacher decided that because this second grade girl only drew people without hands, the little girl felt powerless. All these adults question this child about the meaning of her drawings. She tells them, hands are hard to draw. Somebody commented, I want to see this art teacher's psychotherapy degree. Story 25. I just remembered a poor little guy who drew a self-portrait. He drew with meticulous detail, and when it came down to drawing his pants, he drew the zipper so carefully, but it looked like a pee-pee. I was flummoxed about how to tell him that people might see something there that he didn't intend. Okay, well, this one is really funny. I still kind of feel bad for the kid, because I'm sure he didn't like having to redraw his portrait, especially if the teacher couldn't fully explain to him why. Story 26. I rarely let them draw whatever, because they inevitably would draw predictable cliches. 8th grade boys would draw knives with blood dripping, or an eye, and girls, a unicorn. Trying to get them to draw from life was tough. Story 27. In 9th grade, as an end-of-the-year project, we could basically draw whatever we wanted, and we had a week to do it. Me, being the little car nerd I am, drew the entire drivetrain and suspension of a Chevy K5 Blazer. Story 28. I have a design your own monster Halloween lesson. Most kids draw cute ghosts or cool vampires. One 7th grader drew a sad clown hanging by a belt from a ceiling fan. He had issues. This might have been something that you used to get a referral to a professional. Story 29. We had 3 lessons for it. I spent 2.5 messing around and the last half copying an existing Baja's painting in chalk. That was the only good grade I got in art class. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.